years ago, I got a chance to work with John Petrucci. I didn't know what to expect. Is there house music running too? Okay, it's the guy on the other side. Okay, and what's become of that is a series of guitars that we just launched the 16 model to go along with last year's Majesty. We've never discontinued a model, but very proud to say that together, John's inspiration and ideas, that we've created the most successful signature guitar of any living guitarist. And with that, I'd like to bring Mr. John Petrucci up. Should we get it out of the way? How many of you have seen John and I renegotiate and refresh our contract? Well, I don't have a contract with John Petrucci because I don't want a piece of paper making him play our guitars. I want our service and our dedication and our quality to be what makes him play our guitar. So right now we're going to do what we do every year. We're going to renew our contract. It never gets old, by the way. I might be getting old, but it doesn't get old. So a couple things we're going to do this time is that...
You're far away.
Well, in YouTube world, NAMM performances, you're putting the artist in probably the worst position you could put them in. Because you're putting them on a stage in a noisy situation, no sound check, and then you have 100 videos that get shared 100 times, and it's not exactly the best of presentation. But what we want to do is try and give you an opportunity to maybe learn a little about how John plays, why he thinks, how he got there. And you're going to be seeing this year a show called Pursuit of Tone, which the trailer is playing on some of the TVs at different times. What Pursuit of Tone is a TV series that Ernie and DirecTV are producing. You've probably seen the Guitar Center sessions. This is something that will be an hour about the inside, the heart, mind, and soul of a guitar player. Okay, and we're very proud of this because what DirecTV is going to do with it is then push it out to 200 million handsets through AT&T. So it's the ability to help grow the guitar and teach people on a very grand scale more about what goes into making a great guitar player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little mini version of Pursuit of Tone for you guys.
That sounds awesome, by the way.
How many times have we rehearsed this?
None. I think that that program that he described sounds really, really cool. To me, there's so many things. You can go online right now and look up a YouTube video to play pretty much anything as far as playing technique. And, players are getting younger and younger and better and better. And maybe there's some information about a player's path and their tone and how they get their sound, but to me there's not enough of that, and it's something that's really important to me, and I think it's something that people identify with and ask me all the time, what made you it's not so much how do you play this, but where did that come from? How did you think of that? How do you get that sound? What do you do in the studio? What's your live rig? What's important to you sonically? So I think it's great that this program is going to offer that. That's amazing.
We're going to start at the beginning. When did you know you were going to be a guitar player? And when did you know that this was going to be your life?
I used to have dreams that I played guitar when I was younger. I used to have a recurring dream that I was on stage. I was playing guitar, and it happened over and over, so I felt like I needed to do that.
Did you have a guitar then?
I didn't have a guitar then. No, the first guitar I got was like a kind of plastic acoustic. It had nylon strings. I came home one day to find the headstock broken off. I think my brother did it, but he'll never admit it.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
Of course, probably a good thing they broke my headstock.
growing up where I did in New York on Long Island, there were a lot of people who played. For some reason, it kind of comes in waves. And when I was younger, the wave of people that were playing and the amount of bands and stuff was unbelievable. So I can kind of just walk around my neighborhood and see somebody playing. I remember seeing a guy playing Stairway to Heaven on an acoustic. I never saw that before. And I was like, I wanted to.
You've never been to Guitar Center?
Back then, there wasn't Guitar Center.
Yeah, you know, and that's an interesting thing because James Valentine is here, right? Where are you, James?
Yeah, right there.
James, you know, here's a man who's in one of the biggest bands in the world and is listening to John, but also, I'll tell you a little secret, James has a guitar lesson every week. But in talking to James yesterday, his inspiration in his era was Pearl Jam and basically the Seattle scene. And then he kind of worked backwards. And then when I was talking to Annie Clark, St. Vincent, her first lick she learned was the first lick James learned, which was a Pearl Jam lick.
Right.
And so that's a realization to me, because me was the Beatles. For you, who was it?
Who was it? Growing up on Long Island,
is it Long Island or Long Island?
Long Island, okay. Or Strong Island, as they say. No. When I first heard Rush, that was a big thing for me. Yeah. So I was a big fan of Iron Maiden. There you go. Rush. Wow, look at these two guys right in the front. That's pretty much it. And that was my thing, you know. Eventually Metallica, all the different bands, metal bands, prog bands. Yes, I was a big fan of.
What was there a lick that you learned first? A hook in the song, like what?
The very first lick that I played.
Play it for us.
I don't know if I remember it.
Maddie, are we live?
That's my metal version of Hey Hey My My. That was the jam we were doing. It was actually, you guys remember Kevin Moore, Dream Theater's first keyboard player? We grew up in the same neighborhood, me and Kevin and John Myung. Yeah, they were doing a jam, and they were like, John, play this lick. You know? I didn't play it like that metally because I didn't know how to play yet. But that was pretty. I think that was the very first thing.
So, from there, did you pick up? You got a guitar, right?
Yeah. From there, it's hard to remember the exact.
Did you go forward with music or backwards then in your exploration?
I went current.
Yeah, current.
That makes
okay,
it.
Forward.
Yeah. So again, you know, you can turn on the radio and anything from like Ozzy was on there to Rush. So I'd listen to Randy Rhoads and all that stuff. Van Halen.
Led Zeppelin, not so much?
Yeah, Zeppelin. No, Zeppelin too, as well. And I found that when I would go to try to play a Jimmy Page solo, it would never sound like him. That was one of the greatest mysteries that back then was sort of a problem, but also maybe a blessing in disguise, was that we had no visual as far as learning things. Like, you literally would take an album, stick it on there, turn the speed down so it was half speed, and try to learn it. And as a young guitar player, there were all of these things that I had no idea what it was. I mean, simple things that now seem, you know, basic, like bending. You know, again, I would listen to the Heartbreaker solo and be like, I don't get it. How come when I try it doesn't sound like the notes are right? It doesn't sound like it. I would listen to like a Boston Tom Schultz thing, and there would be all these harmonies, but I didn't know what harmonies were. I'm like, that doesn't sound like a guitar. What the hell is that? I have no idea how to do it. Eruption, hearing that for the first time. It sounded like some sort of keyboard. I was like, how do you do that? So I didn't have a visual, because the only visual would be if you were to go to see that band live and you watch the guy do it. But now, fast forward with a lot of young players now, you can see how anything is done just like that.
John, do you think that one of the things with the internet is maybe it's a mechanical process where you're learning just the notes, but you're not learning any of the techniques behind it? Or let's say in cooking, you can follow a recipe, or you
Right.
can understand what the ingredients are to make that recipe.
I think that because there's so many things that you can see right away how it's done, maybe the thing that you're missing out on is the process of how to get there. You know, all the things that I mentioned, all those different solos, like when I had no idea what it was, and then eventually I'd kind of get a version of it, and then I'd see a friend play it, it would click, and then I would, get it. I think that process of learning in those steps makes you have an experience as a guitar player, as opposed to just having it handed to you. I'm not sure which is in the end going to be better. If you could just see it right away, oh, that's how you do it, or if the discovery process of learning the art is part of growing as a player. I think there's something there.
Well, the guitar is one of the most expressive things there is.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, I remember when I was a little kid, my neighbor was a guy named Frank Marshall, who was a studio guitar player in the 50s. And he told me, Sterling, the guitar is a fretboard with 6 strings on it, and no one will ever master it. I said, you're out of your mind. He says, well, no, Segovia may have mastered the kind of classical music he was playing, and Joe Pass may have gotten it, and at the time Eric Clapton, he goes, Eric Clapton was taking blues and created his thing, but look at all these different voices that come from 6 strings and really basically a fretboard. So I want to talk to you about certain things.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about whose phrasing got you first.
Wow. Whose phrasing got you first?
Because you can play a lick in a bunch of different ways.
You can. I kind of had all these different discoveries along the way of things from guitar players that hit me. And
you want to start with vibrato?
Vibrato, the way I learned how to do vibrato, and this is really funny, but wearing an Iron Maiden shirt, and I was talking about learning things from records. I would learn Iron Maiden solos, and it wouldn't sound like it. How come it doesn't sound like Adrian Smith? So one day I'm learning this solo, and it's slowed down, and I hear the notes stop, and I hear, I'm like, that's how he's doing it. He's actually bending up to the note and back down and up and back down and up. It's just really fast. So it was Adrian Smith. I learned how to do vibrato by listening to Iron Maiden solos.
Other guitar players, vibrato. Vibrato is really, that's your hands and...
It's huge. Yngwie.
Steve Morse.
Steve Morse is actually, to me, I had a progression as far as my level as a player. And as I got better, I would kind of jam with friends in the neighborhood. We have some recordings of old jams that I did, which one day maybe we'll release. Actually, my wife really wants to release them. They're kind of fun. One day, it's always like an older brother or a friend of an older brother. He's like, you got to check out the Dregs. I'm like, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
And I was kind of getting better at guitar. He's like, no, you need to go to the next level. Check out the Dregs. And he showed me the song "The Bash," which is this chicken picking crazy thing. I never thought guitar could be played like that, like Steve. And then I became hooked. And I think I forget the order, but at some point, Steve's first solo album, The Introduction, came out. And I learned every song from that album, and I would sit there with a metronome trying to play his lines and arpeggios and things.
Did you play General Lee?
I didn't play General Lee, no.
I busted you on that.
Yeah, no. I did not play that. But it wasn't only Steve's playing and his versatility as a guitar player, because he played classical guitar, he played, there was country infused, there was rock and everything, but the compositions, is what got me. They're all instrumental, and I could just listen to that stuff over and over and over. It was so musical, so well composed. It wasn't just, passing the time, and that really hooked me on being able to be not only an accomplished guitar player, but a composer as well. And I've always respected that about Steve.
So you go there and you look at Steve Morse, because I remember when the Dixie Dregs first did. How many of you listened to the Dregs ever? I mean, you really, if you haven't, and you're into great, progressive, expressive, wonderful guitar, you should listen to everything Steve Morse has ever played.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
I'll tell you, the other thing is, geographically, they came out of the South.
Right.
And that's the other thing, and that's why the country thing was there. But I mean, there was everything. There was jazz, everything, and
Yeah.
T. Levitz and Andy West.
Oh, it was
I
such
saw
a
him
great
yesterday.
band.
But they came out of someplace. But then I found out Steve went to the University of Miami,
Right.
and who was in his class was Will Lee, the bass player, then Letterman, Jaco Pastorius, and Pat Metheny.
Amazing.
You went to Berkeley.
Yes, I grew up on the East Coast in New York, went up to Boston, to Berkeley, with John Myung, our bass player. We grew up together, went up there. We met our first drummer, Mike, and formed the band there. It was over 30 years ago. We were just young, we were 17, 18 years old. And I went there because I heard that Steve Vai went there. I followed my heroes, Dimiola and all these guys. I wanted to do what they did and follow their path, and they went to Berkeley. So I'm like, I'm going to Berkeley.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about phrasing. I'm going to talk about different players.
Sure.
And I'm going to talk about the things you got from them. But then the final question to lead up to: at what point did you feel like you had your own voice on the guitar? And how important was it for you to listen to Steve's to Steve's deal, to Vai's whammy, or
Sure.
take it from there?
Well, I have a funny story about that. So talking about phrasing and technique and being influenced by all these guys. So Joe Satriani was another really big one for me, because he's somebody who knows how to write a song, knows how to make the guitar speak as a lead, almost like a vocal instrument, and can shred his ass off. So he has everything. And so his phrasing, the way that he approached notes, vibrato, bending, every note he plays is perfectly bent in tune. He has all these cool techniques, and just such a great sense of songwriting. So we have Joe and that influence on me. Then Steve Morse, as I just mentioned, and Steve Vai. Going to Berkeley, I was just completely enamored with his whole thing, like him being hired by Frank Zappa to do all these transcriptions, then going to Berkeley, and he had this flexible series of lessons. I used to mail order, and they'd come like paper, and I would like learn Steve Vai's lesson. I don't know if you guys remember that. And then he was in Alcatraz, and then played with David Lee Roth, and forget it, he's Steve Vai. He was like one of the most innovative guitar players on the planet. So fast forward, I get asked to do G3 by Joe, and I'm up on stage.
Who was in? How many times you done G3?
G3 like maybe 8 times or something like that.
So can you tell us some of the guitar players you worked with, and then
Yeah. Well, initially it was Joe, Steve, and myself.
So finish that story.
Yeah, a bunch. Well, yeah, it was Joe, Steve, and myself. Then we did one with Joe, me, and Paul Gilbert, which was a lot of fun. And Joe, me, and Steve Morse, and Luke.
How was Luke?
Luke was amazing. Luke was incredible. I love him. He's an absolutely phenomenal guitar player.
I didn't mean to stop you from telling
That's
you.
okay. So the first G3 tour. So at one point, at the end of the show, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show. So at the end, all the guitar players come up and we're jamming, right? So, and Steve Morse was in town. I think we were playing House of Blues in Orlando or something. So I'm standing there, and it's Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Steve Morse, and me. And we're trading solos. And the whole time, all I'm thinking is, holy shit. I'm like, they're gonna recognize every lick I ripped off from them. and I'm very quickly going in my head, can't play that one, can't play that one, and it's happening. Wait, Inkbay's not here. Wait, I think I could do that. And It was the most bizarre. It was like, you ever have those dreams where you just transported into the situation and you're completely unprepared? Like, what do you mean we're playing that song? That was me.
It's usually me naked in a hotel room, lock myself out.
Yeah, that's not my dream. You're not in that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hey, you know, this is getting into stuff. By the way, is this working okay for you guys? I learned when you do an MC ask for some cheap applause. Thank you, made me feel good. There's some points I want to make though about guitar and about playing guitar that we're kind of leading up to. You can tell, I guess a baby rattlesnake bites and lets loose all its venom, okay? And a young hotshot guitar player is kind of like a baby rattlesnake. And I was fortunate for over 20 years to play in a jam band with Albert Lee and Steve Morse. Went to Australia, Germany. We could never get hired in America, imagine that. Europe, we did a whole bunch. And different times hotshots would sit in with us. And you could tell the guys who had no clue yet.
Right.
They had chops, they didn't have sensitivity, they didn't have respect. And how they sat in, it was trying to show that they were better. G3 only works to me because of the character and integrity of the musician. And I want you to explain trading solos in a collaborative environment. I think this is a really good lesson to everybody.
Yeah, well, it was certainly a great lesson for me because, you know, those guys that I'm talking about. So all of the above. So Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Luke Ether, Steve Morris, Paul Gilbert. You know, these guys are accomplished on this great level as guitar players, and you know, you might assume, you know, what goes along with that is like these massive egos and this and trying to like play better than the other guy and being all, you know, I don't know what the word is, but disrespectful or too competitive. But it's exactly the opposite. You know, the spirit on stage, on tour, backstage and everything is so, everybody's so welcoming. Everybody is so selfless, yeah, like willing to share, you know, anything. If you're having some issue, you know, I can't believe I forgot to mention this. One of the G3 tours was with Eric Johnson, and Eric is, you know, unbelievable. Another one of these monster players. We showed up for the first show. I think it might have been in South America. It was Joe, me, and Eric, and my rig showed up, and the boogie, like, I guess they had inspected it somewhere in customs, and they broke all the tubes. So I didn't even meet Eric Johnson yet. I didn't even say hello. He comes over, hey man, what's going on with the amp? Let me see that. I think I can fix that. Hey, you know, whoever's texted, bring my screwdriver over or whatever. Next thing you know, he's behind my rig. I didn't even say, hi Eric, my name is John. You know, a while back, my wife and I met Steve Morse somewhere. We were going to do something together, and I pull up, and the car had a little scratch on it. Before I could shake Steve's hand, hey man, I think I could buff that out. What's good? You know, and it's like everybody, you know, Joe, Vi, Paul, all have like this really gracious spirit, and it's contagious. You know, and everybody loves to share and loves to tell stories about how they did this, that, and the other thing. We did a tour with Zappa Plays Zappa. You know, Dweezil's on that tour, and we're talking about like, you know, guitar players love to share the most nerdy details about picks and, you know, all these little things.
But there's a point when they're not, and there's a point in their maturity.
Yeah.
When they do, and the one thing I just say is that that's something I learned and I felt was so beautiful about playing with great musicians, is that they were so secure in what they've done and they've accomplished.
Yeah.
The result you heard was better. I want to talk about Luke a little bit.
Sure.
Because how many of you are familiar with Steve Lukather? Okay. Luke got PR badged as sterile and processed because he played on 800 hit records. Okay? And sometimes people don't consider Luke amongst the highest echelon of guitar players, except for other guitar players. How would you, what strikes you about Luke? What would you say about his playing and how his personality matches his playing?
Oh, it's totally. Luke has this personality that's so huge where he lets it all out. He is unabashed and unafraid, right? And has so much character. And when he plays guitar, I say this sometimes, people ask me about what is it like to play with this person, somebody asked me what it's like to play with Mike Mangini, like somebody like that. And there are certain musicians when you're on stage playing and you're standing next to them and they start to do their thing where there's this crazy amount of energy and confidence.
Thank you.
Mike is like that.
Oh, you weren't?
Sterling is like that. Luke is like that. Like when it's intimidating in a good way. He picks up a guitar, if you're doing like a little sound check, and he plays like one note, right? With so much confidence. It's scary. It's like, holy shit.
But he's very fluid and very melodic.
So melodic, so fluid, and has such a great mixture of being able to put elements of jazz and different styles into his playing. So his lines are always really interesting. And of course, played on some of the most, popular songs in the world, some of the greatest songs. I was watching the other day, there was a live Toto event from Europe. My wife and I were watching it. We had it on, and Steve was just playing his ass off, singing great, great, like, progressive songs. I didn't even know some of them. I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And he's just such a talented musician, composer, guitar player. Amazing.
Okay, so this gets back to you collect tools. When do you become a mechanic? You collect people, inspiration from people, you collect technique. And I go back to the question asked before, when did you start to realize, hey, I got a voice on the guitar? And how much did you have to, do you understand that, what I'm trying to say?
I don't think that I personally realized myself that I have my own voice on the guitar. I think that it was when somebody actually told me that there's something there. And I remember when we released Images and Words, it was like 1992, and we were friends with the band Fates Warning from Connecticut, and Frank, the guitar player, called me and he's like, man, I just listened to it, and he's like, that solo you did on Under a Glass Moon, he was like freaking out in a way, like that it was something that there was something there that he was like identified with. And that was the first time where I kind of got a little bit of a feeling like maybe I'm finding my own way, and it's not so much a mixture of all these different guitar players. And I think that was the first time I got that kind of feedback where somebody let me know that something reached them in a way that was maybe different than before.
How much do you practice?
None. Not at all. No.
Liar. No, and freely admit.
Okay, if I really admit, today about 5 minutes. My practicing goes like this. When I was younger, I used to play 6 hours a day minimum. That's what I had to do to be able to live with myself, for the rest of the day. As I became professional and started touring and recording and stuff like that, I would find that I would play probably even more than that because of, preparing for a tour, having to practice before the show, then the show itself. But at the same time, as my career went on, I would find that I actually needed breaks from it. And I always thought that was weird because I kind of really looked up to like the whole thing where you just have to practice all the time, practice all the time, practice all the time. And I didn't get it until I was a little older that like walking away for a bit, taking a breather, coming back, there's nothing wrong with that. And I find that when I do that, when I come back and pick it up, I kind of have a new spirit about it, a new inspiration. And then the practicing will go in waves again.
There's golfers, and there was one professional golfer that it's the end of the season, and the caddy said to him, look, I'm not going back out here if you're not going to practice. He goes, I promise, I'm going to practice all off season. The caddy put a banana in his head cover, okay? The guy showed up 3 months later, took his head cover off, and there's a banana tied on his thing. You're not going away from the guitar for 3 months.
No, I'm not going away from the guitar. I'm not talking about months. I'm not talking about weeks, but it could be a few days, or it could be a week, or something like that. I think it's healthy. But here's the thing: with any sort of anything that you want to be good at, if it's sports, if it's music, if it's anything, writing, the consistency is what matters. It really is. You can't cram. You can't all of a sudden, like, not practice and then all of a sudden, oh crap, I got a show coming up, and like cram it in. It doesn't work that way. You need to do, and I learned this a long time ago too. Even if you can't get a massive amount of time, don't let that make you say I can't do it at all. Even if you just do 20 minutes, And they say that about going to the gym and stuff like that too. Don't make an excuse because you don't have an hour to work out. If you have 20 minutes, do it. And I think that consistency is what's really important.
Is there a place you go or a thing you do for inspiration?
I have a lot of different things that kind of work as far as inspiration. One of them is writing with the members of my band. I find that very inspiring. This current album that comes out in 7 days, I'm very nervous.
What's it called?
Now we have Dream Theater has a new album called The Astonishing. It will be out in 7 days. It's a double CD concept album. It's crazy. But me and our keyboard player Jordan wrote the whole thing, and we wrote together just in small rooms and in the studio, and I find that very inspiring. Writing with somebody who's so musical and has so much talent and ability, that inspires me, and we kind of work off each other. So that's a big form of inspiration. Sometimes it's when I'm away from the guitar. I'll wake up from a dream or something, and something will hit me. That happens a lot. I've said this many times before, but massive lack of sleep is good. Like when I have jet lag, like if I fly to Japan or something, you know what I mean, James? Like, and you're kind of loopy. All of a sudden you start writing.
Are you calling James loopy? Hey, okay. Yeah. So now another thing.
Yeah.
Your recording process is recording sections that are very, very precise. So now, and then you don't play a track all the way through usually, right? When you guys record a track?
No.
Okay, so doing it in sections and then putting the sections together and then having to do it live in front of somebody, how much, that's really hard, isn't it?
Well, there's a funny thing that happens. Like, let me give you an example of what he's talking about. Okay, so use the most current thing, or current album. We wrote it. It's really long. It's like 2 hours and 13 minutes long. It's like watching a movie. Yeah. So there's 34 songs on them. They were written, like I said, between Jordan and I. We demoed them out, and then we showed them to the guys. Mike Mangini came in and played drums to these demos. So now, okay, we have a song because we have the drums, and then we start layering on top of that, recording the bass and guitars and keyboards. It was orchestrated, so we have a choir and orchestra and everything. And eventually the album is mixed and it's coming out and it's done. So as of right now, today, and the first tour date is February 18th, we have never played those songs together. We've never actually played them yet, right? It's weird. We don't always do it that way. Sometimes we write together in the studio and record and everything. But in this case, when we show up to rehearsals and say, okay, go, and Mike counts off the song, hopefully it will work and sound like a song. But it's a real interesting process. And eventually it does, of course, and we feel really comfortable and we know it works. So, but it's a funny thing to
But if you were also the audience, you're playing to isn't like the Coral Reefer Band, you're playing some guys, well, if it's not quite right, nobody's going to know. You have the black t-shirts like this, and wait a minute, he didn't go to that B section right and stuff. Yeah. I'm going to tell you another thing. When I go to Dream Theater concerts, which actually I do, they give me a senior discount, and I sit on the side stage. And which, by the way, is really nice because most artists don't treat you very nice anymore. They can't help it, but they've got staff, and you might get a Diet Coke and one of those miniature carrots. But the band's already in Omaha, and when I go to Dream Theater, and I'm sure now that Maroon 5, I'm sure I'm going to get great seats there. 2 carrots. Okay. I listen to John's headphone mix. This will blow your mind. It's almost all snare drum.
Yeah.
Okay. And why it's almost all snare drum, and I want you to play guitar. What people don't understand about John Petrucci, they don't understand about Albert Lee. Is Albert here? Where's Albert? Okay. Well, he's short. He's probably here. The greatest guitar players in the world, in my opinion, are also the greatest rhythm guitar players in the world.
Right.
What he plays during a show when he's not soloing, it's mind-blowing because he's basically playing with the snare or some part of the drums. And would you just give me an idea of some of the stuff on the lower strings? And this is going to actually get into the guitar commercial part. By the way, this is taking great restraint to not talk about my products yet. Can we talk about guitars a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't mind doing this?
No, not at all. Well, with Sterling, two things about what he said. One is, as far as people, watching and analyzing, I've played songs live before and played a solo, and then actually had somebody email me and say I didn't play it with the right fingering. And then I actually go back and realize he was right, and say, "Oh wow, I didn't play." So yeah, there is a hyper level of analyzation that comes. But it's all fun.
That causes you problems sometimes. I mean,
well, you have to kind of like, as you're playing, try not to think about that too much, because then you get really self-conscious, and that doesn't let the music shine through. But in answer to what he was talking about, as far as playing live and him hearing the headphone mix, and I've said this before too, as far as the role of the guitar, if you think about watching a concert of any band, unless it's just a jam band where the guy's soloing all over the place, you're playing rhythm. What's the percent? What would you guys think? Like 95% of the night you're playing rhythm? If you actually if you took all the solos, I don't know, take a Dream Theater album and clock the solos, they'd probably be, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Right?
But you know what though, the thing, this is what I'm getting to as far as guitar playing, is you spend all your time practicing your solos. I never see players practice their rhythm.
Right.
Okay, and really the most complete players, and this sounds crazy, but it's really true, and James, I think you'll back that up, rhythm guitar, I mean, if you listen to Albert Lee, there's nobody who's ever played greater country rhythm guitar than Albert Lee. He's the greatest soloist that's ever lived, but you don't practice for them, but when it really comes to, that's what builds the track.
Absolutely, that's what's going to make it sound tight. So, earlier I mentioned Metallica. Like when I heard Master of Puppets, I was like, yes, I get it now. So the whole thing about rhythm guitar playing in my style and with the band, we're like a band who's influenced by prog as far as like Yes and the Dregs and Pink Floyd and stuff like that, but we're like post Metallica and Maiden and stuff, and that whole thing is about super tight rhythmic things that are locked in with the drums, with the kick and the snare, and we kind of very early on came up with this. It ended up being like a stylistic thing. We didn't think of it at the time, but for example, like in the song Metropolis, like when it goes into the verses, we do this, right? That whole kind of tight thing with the drums and it making the music and chords go around that. That's a technique that we do all the time, and it can get very complex. And if that is out of whack, if that's not tight between the drums and the bass, the whole band falls apart. It sounds awful. So it's a huge part of the night. The rhythm playing having your hand, especially if you're playing 7-string, in this position, you know, for 2 hours plus, you have to be conditioned to do that, and the right hand work to do all that for that long, and then jump into a solo. It's all conditioning. It's.
I think it's scary.
My analogy is like, you guys have watched like the Olympics, like gymnastics and stuff like that, right? So you know when they go to do a floor routine or something. So imagine if before they had to do that perfect floor routine, they had to run, you know, 5 miles and then run right into the thing and do that thing perfectly. That's what playing a concert is like, because your total stamina, you know, you're playing all these chords, you're locked in, you're performing, you're with the band, you're with the audience, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, solo, go, you know, and then you all of a sudden you have to be loose and fluid and expressive. And I think that shift of gears, like that, it's all a mental game. It's part conditioning and it's part mental.
When do you lay out?
When do I lay out? When the song dictates it. You know, my guitar playing is all about the song and how it's going to help it be better. So if that means that there's no guitar and another instrument is featured, whether it's vocals or piano or something, then that's my job. So I kind of like almost put on like the producer hat and think of the bigger picture. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're playing the Majesty.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have a contract, and also, as James will tell you too, I'm available all the time. The cell phone, I mean, if you text me, you'll get an answer back. I sleep very little, but I start at 5 in the morning, this is true story, and I finish at 9:30 at night. I go into my man cave.
And you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, so,
right.
You know, at 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, I could text him and he's up, and I'm like, why are you up? Because it's like 5.
I have to tell you something, I actually really love this. I think I'm like Babe Ruth or whatever said he's the luckiest man on earth. I mean, I get to create tools for great and diverse artists. I get to spend time with them. I get to talk to them, and in certain times, I get to play with them. And it's really funny. And I won't talk very much more about me, but the real interesting thing about playing with John Petrucci or playing with Steve Morse is that the average person will look at that and say, "Why is he playing with Sterling?" Okay, and it's not because I make his guitar. I think that you can help me there too, is that it's a language. I mean, I play completely different than you.
Yeah.
And I play nowhere near as good as you, obviously, but the pressure I get from the people in the YouTube comments when we do Berkeley things together really hurts me, actually. But he insists I play, and why?
Well, first of all, he's being too modest. Sterling is an awesome guitar player. He recently recorded an album, and it's great. He plays really great. You're not going to find, you know, people in the industry that own companies and run them that can actually play and back it up. So he's a great guitar player. He's being modest. But, you know, as far as this relationship that we have about developing instrument, building guitars that are going to be, for me, something that's going to allow me to be the best guitar player and musician I could be, and then maybe translate to somebody else who picks it up and they love it and that inspires them. That relationship requires this kind of this synergistic understanding of music and guitar. And so many times Sterling has sat me down in his house, different rooms, and we just listen to music. We listen to guitar players. He turns me on to all these guys I never heard of, you know, sends me CDs, things like that. We jam, you know, we'll be at a house, we start to play. I walk up on stage at one of these events, we're playing. We're developing a guitar, and we're at the factory. We pick it up, and we play, and we jam. And that kind of back and forth makes the two of us know that there's an understanding. You know, he's not coming from some corporate place where he doesn't get it. He's coming from an artistic place, and that always shines through. That's always the most important thing. And anytime there's an idea like, I wonder if we can do this, or would it be a good idea if we did that? His answer is always like, first of all, we can do anything. Second of all, don't think about what somebody will think or whatever. This is about what works for you. What's your perspective? And if you stay true to that, we're going to come up with some really unique and successful and incredible instruments.
The Majesty was the greatest challenge we've ever had, because he called me on a Saturday morning and said, I have an idea for a guitar. And I've told this last year, but still, I go, what is it? He goes, the Stallion. Look at the phone.
Hey, Stallion,
Yeah, here I got Rocky Balboa with the Stallion.
Sterling, I want to do a Stallion guitar.
Yeah, I said, yeah, well, so let me guess, it's got to be fast, right?
Yeah.
And then you said, well, sleek and powerful. Okay, I got a lot to work on. I'll get right back to you. Holy shit. No, but what he wanted was, you see now, when you look at this shape, it is kind of like a running horse. Okay? But really what it was, his playing has developed so much and his body's changed and everything since we started working. He can feel 10,000ths of an inch with the pickup. And he anchors his pinky under the bobbin of the bridge pickup. And if that's not right, he knows it right away. And at first he was really confused when we were working on guitars. I said, well, that's because it's actually 30,000ths different. And we'd get it ready. Wow, that's a difference. So this was a sonic requirement, an ergonomic requirement, and a structural requirement that required making a guitar different than anybody's ever made it. The actual Majesty is the shape of the shield and the neck. And then it's inlaid into a basswood carrier, for lack of a better word. Its balance, its weight, is every single thing has been, I don't know, I think we made 26 prototypes and started over. Okay, and made another 20-something. This is the most advanced electric guitar in the world. And so what's happened to John is, John's got the ability to cross genre. I look at Joe Walsh is playing the national anthem for the Lakers game, and he's playing a JP. I go see John Fogerty, and he's playing it. And so the things John wants in a guitar actually have really worked because they've crossed genres. How many of you have one of his guitars, and how many have your guitars and don't play Dream Theater kind of music? They play a different style. See, to me, that's the most valid compliment John can get as a guitar designer.
You know what? I've learned this over the years. I mean, first of all, I'm in such a great position that I don't take lightly how special this is to be able to have a relationship with Ernie Beau, Music Man, and Sterling and his team, so that I can come up with ideas for an instrument and then actually have it turn into a real instrument. I mean, it's wild. That never gets old. But what I found over the years are that the things that I require as a player, my wishes, my desires as a player, like, if only this was like this, or if only this was like that, are very actually common. When I talk to other guitar players, they're like, yeah, I always thought that, or yeah, I have the same concerns. So I think that has something to do with it, is that it's not that my way of thinking is so outside the box. It's actually kind of common. It's kind of like universal in a way. And so the features of the guitar are things that are appealing to a lot of different players. I think that has something to do with it. Even things like my hand size and everything, it's not like there's abnormal things going on.
It's awesome. John, I want to thank you because I know you got a signing. We're going to give you a couple minutes before the signing. I want to thank all of you for coming today. That's really outstanding. Hopefully you support our products, but if not, I hope you learned something today that might have inspired you, motivated, or answered a question. But thank you very much.
This was great. Thank you, Sterling.